So, welcome to the, what is this? February meeting of the South End Village Planning Commission. We have been discussing the a proposal for some additional zoning regulations for the village, particularly in the small lots. In response to a request about a year ago from the trustees to look at the issue, we had a study done by Studio B Architecture, did a number of workshops, and came up with a list of 9 proposals, and three of them were included in draft regulations, which were subject of a trustees' public hearing in December. And so 2 of the issues that came up at that meeting were, number one, to look at how much non-compliance would be caused by the new setback rules, and secondly, whether or not driveways should be exempted from the we should use a different per percentage for lot coverage. So I want to take them in order and then get comments and talk about it. So the first is we wanted to look at how many houses would be potentially non-conforming, or I should say how many lots would become non-conforming because of the side yard rules. And as was discussed at the meeting, that is also impacted by the 4/10 rule, which, in the way that the zoning works, if a lot is otherwise non-conforming, that you first apply the 4/10 rule. So we have been unable to get information from the building department. So what we did was we had Studio AB Architecture look at 2 streets where they had sufficient data to be able to assess all the lots and see which were in compliance and which were not. And the 2 streets that we picked were Post Lane, which I think partially because it has a real mix of houses from large to small, and a real mix of sizes of lots. So we thought it was a good, and it's had a number of houses new houses built over the years, but most of them, but interestingly enough, not as many in the current wave as some of the other streets. And then we picked Dale Street, because Dale Street's probably the most extreme example in the village of very small lots. Those are really, really small lots, and it's amazing. Even on those small lots, people have figured out how to build houses, but they have. So the study that, just to sort of in very basics, some summary. The study that Studio AB conducted showed that on Post Lane, 10% of the lots would become non-conforming under the new setback rules and would not be able to use the 4/10 rule to come into compliance, i.e. if they built a new house, they would have to, if they try to build something, they would have to ask for a variance. And 17% of the lots on Dale Street would become non-compliant. Or to put it in reverse, 90% of the lots on Post Lane would still be conforming lots, and 83% of the lots on Dale Street, which are the smallest lots in the village, would still be conforming lots. So I do believe that the concern that was raised by some attorneys and some others at the last trustees hearing, that this would cause massive non-conformance in the village, is probably not the case, which is, I think, good news.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
When you say, you're doing percentages and stuff, I mean, these streets are not long. How many lots are there?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I think we looked at it. I don't know. What I can tell you is the average lot size on Dale Street is 12,000 feet, 12,518, and the average lot size on Post Lane, it should say, sorry, it says Post Crossing, but it should be Post Lane, is 20,000 feet. I'm just seeing if there's a number of lots.
I'm just curious because, 10% of a big number is still a lot, 10% of a small number.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Plus, I hardly think it would be representative of the whole village.
Well, there's no, unless we get the stats for the whole village, there's no way for me to know that. All I can do is take 2 streets, and I think these streets should be fairly indicative. So I'm not saying it will be 10% across the
Wouldn't it
village.
make logical sense if we just take what the present zoning allows, and then you take what you want to propose and how that would vary the present zoning? You'll see right away.
Well, the problem, the issue, as we
be
talked
changed.
about in the meeting, is the 4/10 rule actually does solve most of the non-compliance.
On the very narrow lot.
Correct. So, and on the large lots, on the less narrow lots, they clearly can comply. So what we were looking at is what lots, so I thought what was asked at the meeting, perhaps I was wrong, was what lots would not be able to comply without applying for a variance?
Right, and then-
Because you can't, let me make the obvious point, you can't change setback rules from what they have been for 100 years and assume that every house will be in compliance, because obviously they were built under different rules. So I think the concern was, will the ZBA get flooded with new variance requests? So what the study looked at was how many lots would have to go to, assuming someone was going to build a new house, how many lots would have to go to get a variance to comply?
I think we just take the zoning rules and just see how the setbacks would apply at different sizes and intermediate sizes, and then see how the 60% would apply
we did
across the
that.
board. If you do that, you'll probably see right away whether there's
I think we did that.
comply or not comply.
The reality, so the problem is, because we have such a variance of size, so we took 459 houses, and 18% appear to be potentially subject to noncompliance. The problem with that is, without going through the individual lots, you don't know which could potentially be subject to the 4/10 rule or not. So 18% is the potential universe, I guess is one way to put it. But when you actually apply, for example, on Post Lane, it gets much smaller. It's only 10%. Because when you actually look lot by lot, when you look at it, Dale Street, it stays close to 18%, it stays to 17%. So that was based on 459, which is 18% of the, I'm sorry, let me correct that, I apologize. We looked at 2,529 lots, of which 459 or 18% appear to be potentially subject to noncompliance. But it was very hard to know why or how. So what we then did is said, let's take 2 streets that maybe will represent 2 different cases. I wanted Dale because I think that does have the smallest lots in the village, so it should be the most extreme. And I thought Post Lane was sort of an average street. We could take other streets, but so this was a way of trying to come up with, sort of back into the numbers. But I think what's interesting is you're not seeing massive noncompliance. You're really not. So put it in reverse again, even in the broadest brush, 82% of the lots can comply. We think the number's actually lower, that it's going to, when you look at the village as a whole, you're going to be closer to Post Lane than you are to Dale Street, but there's no way of knowing without going through a thorough review with the building department of all the actual data. So just I thought it was interesting that, you do sort of, it does work, which I think is sort of the question that was raised in the meeting is, doesn't this mean that most lots will be non-compliant and therefore everyone's going to the ZBA? And I don't see, the numbers don't seem to show that. So The other thing, by the way, when we looked at Dale Street in particular, the variance in current size of houses versus potential size of houses is extreme. It's very extreme, which is what we see happening all over the village, and certainly why you probably need to do something, because the average size house there is about 1,600 feet. And no one's building 1,600 square foot houses these days. So, you see what's happening. You're replacing a 1,600 square foot house with, putting aside the ways our rules work, what is in reality probably about a 3,500 to 4,000 square foot house. So you're more than doubling the size, which is, I think, why we're looking at these issues. So, any further comments, questions, audience? On that one?
Audience is here.
Whether or not you can pick them up. Okay. So the other thing that we looked at, which has been more difficult, is all the issues that have come up about the driveways. So what actually sort of occurred to me after the trustees meeting was that, what we've talked about is we think there's much more lot coverage going on in the new houses than has historically occurred, but we didn't really have those numbers. So we had Studio AB look at the new houses that have received building permits in the last 5 years, and what the average lot coverage was. Now, so one other way to look at it is in a zone like this, you would expect lot coverage to be somewhere between 27 and 30%. That would be sort of ideal. Very hard to do in a village of this age for all the different reasons. And
Depends what you mean by lot coverage. What are you including in lot
words
coverage?
the amount that would be not vegetated. I'm talking about it from an environmental point of view. So if the state came in and said this is what your rule is, their average would say, in a village like this close to the water,
That's including everything, driveway, everything.
you should cover 27.
I would say it's probably more than that.
I'm just telling you what the state says. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying what their average is.
The
Yeah,
state thinks that's optimal?
correct.
Okay, just to be clear.
Can
Right.
you do me a favor? I can't record that back there. Can they?
Yeah, I'll repeat it. So what was asked?
It doesn't work that way, please, just,
Where do I go?
it's front row.
That little
you can
thing
sit
right
down.
over there.
Beautiful.
I'm on the other side.
Sit down if you want.
No, I don't want to sit down. I just wanted to be clear that the state has pronounced that it would be optimal in these lots to have 27% lot coverage,
27 to 30%.
27 to 35% lot coverage,
30%.
30%.
Now that's difficult to achieve because of the history of this village, the age of this village, the density of the village. So you wouldn't be surprised if you don't quite meet that, but that would be the ideal.
Right, thank you.
Correct.
Now,
So
where does this come from the state?
the state issues guidelines for areas and in the different environmental circumstances, how much of the lot should be built. And remember, we are a village which is almost totally within the most sensitive environmental zone. So what I asked Liz to look at is what has the average been of the new houses being built? And by the way, if you look at many of our streets, we come fairly close to that right now, in terms of the average of what's built. The average of what's covered. If you look at old houses, that is about where they are. That is about right.
Because old houses didn't have many amenities.
So you're right. So the average in the last, and the average actually is almost doesn't vary. So virtually every house, every one of these houses gets to the same point, is they generally cover 40% of the lot, which is very high. And so I think what we perceived, which is a radical difference in amount being covered, is both very high and ultimately, from an environmental point of view, I would argue, not a sustainable amount. The state would argue, not a sustainable amount unless you do something. And that gets us back to our famous sewer conversation, which everyone was so enthusiastic about.
From this point of view,
Right.
this environmental point of view, when you
Right.
say coverage, are you talking about building,
Everything that's not
or are you talking?
permeable.
Okay, so that includes driveways, that
Includes- right,
includes
correct,
patios,
right.
that includes pools.
And so we were close, just to give you some sense, on older streets, if you look at the older houses, for the reasons you said, we are right now very close to the 30% number. So a little higher than the state, but within that mean. The new houses are at 40%. So they're covering much more of the lots. We can't sustain that. Long-term, if that continues to happen, the village will be forced into doing something about it, which is, to me, an enormously expensive, right? So a little bit the problem we have in the village center, except magnified 100 times.
Well, village center is a completely different issue.
Well, except you don't have the ability to,
That's
well,
sewers that are in the groundwater.
no,
That's
but,
something else.
okay, so let me just make it very simple. You can't sustain 40% coverage, not sustainable long-term.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
that,
a lot
so
of
that
the coverage,
bolsters.
a lot of the coverage is patio, which is
Doesn't matter.
Well, that- that
Doesn't
bolsters-
matter.
That
Water,
grade.
water is water, whether it's a
Yeah.
patio or a house or a driveway
Yeah.
or a deck.
So that's a.
It's not
and the water-
absorbing.
And the water will percolate in the lawn.
No.
And a lot of the
No.
patios are
Lawn
permeable.
is green though.
Huh?
Lawn is green.
No, but when the water permeates into the lawn, it gets into the water is coming off of that. First of all, the water doesn't totally permeate, but when it does, it now has things in it, right? It's not purely clean when it comes off of a patio or a
true.
deck.
It isn't.
Right, it isn't, or a driveway, and that's the problem you
Well,
have.
driveway, man, not a patio.
Absolutely a patio.
Your patio
Why
is-
What's on the
patios are
patio?
subject to the same kind of
Whatever is,
dust and
what's on the
debris and.
right,
Oh,
right.
come on, the dust is coming off with the rain. Rain brings down the dust too. What are you
Well,
talking about?
of course it does.
So what are you
But-
talking about? Come on.
Oh,
So,
well.
so the 40% is, we think, not a sustainable number.
Yeah, and I agree
so, so the problem that everyone perceives, and I think residents perceive, is accurate. That there's a substantial difference, and we talked at what we've been talking about, and we certainly heard in the workshops, is it changes the nature of a street because you are actually covered. You actually have less vegetation, which a lot of people were arguing about. And again, I always feel more comfortable when there are numbers to back it up. So our perception that there's much more coverage going on is correct.
You know something? There's more landscaping going on now
You're wrong.
than there was
That's not
before.
true. That's not true. Eduardo,
Absolutely.
if there's more
Listen,
coverage, there's less,
where I
they may be
live-
bigger,
Where I live used to be all potato fields,
but that's vegetation.
but that's not landscaping, okay? It was all potato fields, and the potato fields it's not
So like
vegetation,
take
the way you're talking about.
take
Now
my
you have-
street.
Now you have beautiful.
Take my street.
Now you have beautiful homes that are landscaped with trees and everything.
Eduardo, that's ridiculous. Take my street. My street has had houses in it since probably 1840, right? Those houses 10 years ago averaged 30% of the lot. Now they average, now the non-vegetation is 40% of the lot. You may have a taller hedge. That's not more vegetation.
that's true.
That's more expensive vegetation. It's not more vegetation. It's just not. It's just not. It's not more vegetation. So yes, on streets that were farm fields, you could argue there's more landscaping, but most of the village was not farm fields in the last 10 years. So the argument is you have more lot coverage than you should have, and that's why one of the ways to deal with this is to create less coverage. So what we've been talking about is, so how do you deal with the driveways and that concept? What we've been struggling with, honestly, is we have not been able to come up with a number that exempts the driveways and still works. It just doesn't. We have not been able to come up with a formula. We've been struggling now for 6 weeks to come up with a
Very
formula.
simple. Don't let anybody build anything.
No,
And
no.
you'll fix it, you'll have all the green you want.
So what we thought,
No accessory buildings, no patios.
So what we thought-
No nothing,
we thought-
and only driveway.
You know, it used to be that patios I mean, were green. I mean, it was
Right.
lawn. You
Right.
played on the lawn. You
So-
didn't need cement or whatever
It
underneath your
depends what
feet.
you like. I love a patio.
I'm not arguing
I
the
know.
patio's a bad
Well,
thing.
you know, you're a very urban fellow.
But no, but I'm not arguing,
You know, I'm
again,
not an urban
let's be
fella.
clear, this zoning is not saying you shouldn't build a patio, or you shouldn't build a pool, or you shouldn't build a guest house, or you
it's
shouldn't
just
build a garage, you
it's-
shouldn't do a driveway.
Well,
All it's
you
claiming,
keep on cutting, you won't be able to.
we're not
go
cutting,
west.
so,
It's just in
so
scale,
what we
scale.
came up with to discuss was the concept that if your driveway was permeable, you would
what
get
is
a
that?
credit of 50% of the size of the driveway towards your lot
And then you have to define
coverage.
permeable.
Right. That seemed to be a way to deal with still allow people to have the driveway
Well,
they
you need a
wanted,
driveway, yeah.
but by forcing them to do it on a permeable basis, still be able to meet the code.
So we have to what is permeable? So it has to be a definition that people understand.
Right.
I think you're getting a little too complicated.
Builders
I'm just,
understand.
what I am saying is we haven't been able to come up with an easy formula that just exempts driveways,
No,
which has been the problem.
it is a problem.
Because driveways vary,
And you-
and that gets very complicated because,
And that's
again,
not driving
and let me
force.
let me tell you why it doesn't work, because I think it would be something you would be reasonably comfortable with. Trying to get, then someone, because the idea that came up at the trustees meeting is, why don't we say, to the extent you have required parking, that your driveway is exempted. As anyone who's looked at the applications knows, trying to find what driveway is required for required parking is like you would need a advanced scientific degree. And again, puts the building department in a spot where they're doing endless math and trying to figure out what's required, what's not required. It seems to me we shouldn't be doing that. If you want to put in a driveway, put in a driveway. To the extent you create a permeable driveway, you can get a 50% credit for it, and that's going to be part of the mix of figuring out how much lot coverage you can have.
And that's not including a court for cars. That's not including.
You do what you want. We're not saying you.
Yeah.
In other words, the idea was stop trying to prescribe what you do, and
Right.
just saying you decide what you want, but you have certain things to trade with.
So the court should be permeable as well then.
Correct. If it's permeable, then it's 50% exempted. So that was a way of trying to. I'm not saying it's a great
If
answer.
it's permeable, it should be 100% exempted.
That is one other option. You just exempt it if it's permeable.
I mean, that's what we
Right.
had decided a couple of months ago.
Right. And that may
Well,
be
we
the other option.
didn't, we didn't,
You voted on it.
Right.
You didn't, you voted on it.
well, but then it came back for discussion.
Well, no, you voted on it, then everybody changed their mind, but
Right.
it's okay.
Right.
And, it
I don't know
does
what-
require.
Therefore, votes really don't
Right.
mean anything.
No, it does require a definition of permeable, but it is one other way of dealing with it, because just exempting it doesn't seem to work.
No, I don't think it should be
Because
just.
we couldn't come up with anything that didn't get you back towards the 40%,
Right.
which is what we're trying to solve, is get that 40% down to 30 to 35%.
Yeah.
That's really what we're trying to do, which is...
At the top, yeah.
Right, well, what we've seen again, I must tell you what's very interesting is when you look at the actual applications, virtually everyone does exactly to the max.
Oh, I know.
In everything they do.
I've
In
got it right
FAR,
next
in
door
lot
to me.
coverage, in patios, and pools, and guest house, they're always going right to the edge.
Yeah, they-
And so I think if we say it's going to be, you can cover 65, everyone will cover 65. I mean, the thought that everyone will cover 63 is just not shown by the application. It is what it is. So
Okay.
those were the two big issues I thought
So
that
how do
came
we
up.
discover what permeable is,
I will ask Glynis
to recommend?
to send something around and maybe post on the village website what her definition would be.
Okay. All right.
Those, I think, are,
You had to include not just driveways, but the parking courts. That has to be part of the sentence,
right. Well, it's any parking area,
whatever.
right? Whether it's a drive, I mean, it's all, and again,
Yeah, I mean,
I think what we're trying to do is not
plus
tell
the
people
parking
how to do it.
regulation, parking
Right.
regulation says you have to have access, direct access.
Right,
Which
right.
means you can't just have a driveway that's 8 foot wide.
Right.
You won't have
You have to have a
direct
court,
access. Yeah, you have to
basically.
have something.
No,
Right.
I understand,
Right.
but it should be written.
I think it is. I think the parking regulations say that.
I don't think it says that, it just says it has to be,
Right.
if you have to have
Yeah.
access,
So I think it
you
So it
have
would
to,
be garage or
you
any
have to have a
parking
way
area.
of
I mean, sorry,
moving
drive.
around.
Right.
Drive or any parking
And
area.
as much as we can make it as easy for people to understand as we can.
Correct. Well, we're trying to make it easy for the applicants to understand and easy for the building department to apply.
Interpret.
And use as little judgment on either side as possible. I think the judgment we're trying to give people is, as we've done in terms of the GFA, this is your amount of GFA. Use it in whatever way you want. We're not telling you how to use it. You want to have the world's biggest pool house? Fine. You want to have a big house and no pool house? Fine. We're not telling you how to do it, but that's how much you have to work with.
Off the point,
Yes.
did you read in the press about East Hampton considering basements as part of GFA?
Yes, I did. I have to say, and again, just looking at what we've seen so far, and it may change. And I asked Glennis to look at it. The applications we've seen, we don't see a lot of. I know it's been very common in East Hampton. I think it's common in East Hampton because their rules are much stricter on GFA.
Okay.
But we haven't seen a lot of Southampton houses using basements that go beyond the base of the house.
Right. Yeah, I never-
It really is not. I mean, I'm not saying it won't happen.
Is that what's happening in East Hampton?
Well, I think part of what's happening in East Hampton, the East Hampton rules are, as people have pointed out, much, much stricter than ours on GFA. And so I think given that, and given that builders are motivated by the same pressure that we're seeing here, they're fitting in that square footage by expanding basements to a much greater degree.
Most of the new builds that I've seen are doing that to some extent.
We didn't find, I mean, we should work together to see if we can analyze more of them, because we didn't find
I've never
them.
seen that. Usually you have
I-
the basement, the house goes right on top of it.
Well, now because they want the window wells, because there are bedrooms,
Right.
bathrooms and everything down there, they need the light space. And also, it's a separate end.
It's a window well. Yeah, but that's not the basement. We're talking about the basement expanding. The window well is a window well. I have 3 window wells.
But, okay, does it go into the ground next to that so that you actually get light into that window?
Of course.
Okay, so that's not sitting right on your exterior
Right, but it's
wall.
a
It's
window.
beyond the exterior.
But what's happening in East Hampton is different. What's happening in East
Well,
Hampton.
now, wait a minute, excuse me, I'm not
I'm
done.
sorry.
But they're also adding now separate entrances, so that they have to have the space for a stair by, whatever kind of
Again,
law.
that's not basement, that's exterior. Okay, that's not basement. That's exterior.
That is
That's an
an entrance
It's an
into
entrance.
the
Right.
basement that
I
has
Well,
to...
that would be part of lot
Has to
coverage.
establish a
Instead of a
certain
building.
width of stair.
Right, instead of a build. I understand, but that's not basement.
It's going to the basement.
It's going to, but it's not basement.
So let me tell you what they're trying to do in East Hampton, because that's not what they're dealing with in East Hampton.
Okay.
So
What are they dealing with?
in East Hampton, what they're dealing with is the
The basement
basement
is bigger than the
itself
foot of the
is larger than the
house.
footprint. So not the stairway down, not the window well, but the actual basement goes beyond the house.
Really?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
to more than 8 feet or
Correct.
6 feet?
Underground, I mean, we're not talking
Right.
about exterior going in, we're talking about
They're
actual
pushing the
basement.
basements out,
Really?
basically.
So we're all going to be tunnel livers.
Right.
That I never heard of, so that's interesting.
We're going to be mold.
Yeah, that-
So we haven't seen that here.
That I would not agree with
Right.
myself.
Not yet.
We can't see it.
Right, well, we
Can't
haven't,
see it, you
we
don't
haven't,
know.
it hasn't shown up in the applications, let me put it that way.
Okay, all right.
I mean, you can tell, I mean, if you see the footprint of the basement, if it's not covered with a slab or something, you know it's not
Right.
happening.
So just on these 2 issues, because as was mentioned, the trustees will have a new hearing next Thursday
Are
night.
you going to share this information with them prior?
Yeah,
to-
yeah. I'm
Okay.
just, there are some errors I found, I want to fix it, and then we'll send it around.
Okay. Ask Glennis how many houses actually are on First Lane and Dale.
Yeah, no, I will. I think I can't find it, but I know she knows.
And let's do the positive before the next.
Yeah. On the setback, it looks, we know what the likely range of nonconformance is, and the trustees can decide what they think based on that range. And on the driveways, just to paraphrase what you just said, what you would suggest is we allow permeable driveways to be exempted, period.
Well,
I say 50%. I like the 50%.
Then what came up was, how do you know what's a permeable?
Well, I think in either of these cases, as someone pointed out, we need to define
We need to
permeable.
define it.
So we'll come up with that and send it around before the trustees meeting.
Does this apply to flag lots, or is that a whole different
It's the
subsection?
same story.
Yeah, I mean, there's other provisions
The
of flag lot that
flag
take
is
care
not-
of the
yeah.
flag, but
The
if
flag
they...
is not counted.
No,
Right.
I understand that, but
Right.
it seems that the,
What it would help on the flag lots, just to your point,
Okay.
to the very substantial amount, is the flag lot is where the lot coverage has the worst impact.
I know.
Because if you're at
That's
40%,
right.
you now, and you
It
have
really
houses
is.
on four sides of you, then
Really is.
obviously the people, your
That-
neighbors are
that
getting
is-
the most
That's a
impact.
big deal.
Right,
And
right.
scale is just, oh, wacky
Right.
on the flag lot.
Right,
It's wacky.
I don't know, I wouldn't agree with that. But, you know.
Of course you don't. You live on one.
That's right, and I've got no problems with my neighbors. You know, I got them, but, you know, even in a regular house, you're going to have houses on three sides of you. So a
Right.
flag lot, you got one more side, but
Right.
it's not like the end of the world, it's
Right.
still.
I understand. I understand what you're saying, Eduardo. It's just a matter of preference. I mean, it's just a matter of
Right.
preference.
Questions, comments?
No, I thought that was really good.
Thank you.
Very interesting, actually. And since the board I serve on, we see a lot of plans
Right.
and new ones. Certainly, the lot coverage is a huge issue.
Right.
And so is how close these smaller houses are to each other. People are very, well, their house is dwarfed by a new build often.
Right.
And it would be, I think, for the better of the village if there could be a formula that everyone could understand, I agree.
right.
And that would somehow lessen that impact
Right.
to preserve the village, you know, it's important.
Right.
And I see that people are just distraught,
Right.
and I can understand why most of the time, but unless the zoning is changed, there's nothing that I can do.
It's just a problem of scale. I mean, it really is. It's a problem.
What scale, but
The
you know, the
problem of
problem...
spacing, a
Yeah.
lot of it.
I mean, I think, that, you know, the
but
problem...
still it's scale as well.
I know, I'm not allowed to say scale.
You
so-
know what I find so interesting is, because I always think if you can use facts, it's such a more helpful way of starting stuff.
Of course it is.
Maybe they don't
Of
believe that in the White House, but
course.
I believe that here. So,
Well, it's the other,
And you know,
they're alternative facts.
and the point about,
Give it alternative facts all the time.
yeah, we could have those too. And the point
but, no,
about,
but seriously, if you look at what's so interesting, I thought the most interesting thing about the Studio B study is the gap between the historic size of houses on these streets and the new houses is really the core issue. And that doesn't mean the new houses are bad houses. It just means that you can understand why there is so much impact, because if you take a street that, like Dale Street, at 1,600 square foot houses, and they're replaced by 4,000 square foot houses, then the house that is left that's smaller certainly has an impact. And so if we can do things like reduce the lot coverage, make them set back more, I think these are ways of dealing with what may be an inevitable
and,
change in the village.
she brought up a very good point. I have seen the driveway and parking court has subsumed any green space on these smaller lots.
Right.
And so they become almost like townhouses.
Yeah,
It's
they
odd.
Right, yeah.
And then next to it, if it hasn't been redone, is actually a lawn.
Yes.
Right.
right.
So I think that would actually help the appearance, at least,
Right.
because I deal mostly with, you know, what you can see when you
Right.
drive down the
Yeah,
street,
right.
which is part of why people
Right.
come here or want to
Yeah.
live here,
Yeah.
and why I want to have a house here. So I think that would be an improvement that is not really onerous, to tell you the truth. Thanks, and thanks for doing all the good work.
Thank you.
Anything else? See you next Thursday.
Oh,
Thursday.
next Thursday, we should be here. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
One
Yes,
request,
sorry. I
no problem.
apologize.
Would it be possible for Glennis from Studio AB to come
She is
next
coming.
Thursday? She is, okay, because I think that would be great.
She's
just
coming.
to-
I think I realized at the last hearing that
She's so wonderful.
she knows so many of the facts that it would have been very helpful to have her there when people
She's a great
were asking
presence to
things.
have.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And she did the work, so she
Yes.
can-
Well, and
she owns it.
she can just speak about it
Right.
very, very
Right.
easily.
She also is very knowledgeable about how this compares to others. So like your question before, like who says it should be 20, I think she can answer that and explain why that is the case.
Good, I think that's a great,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
a great process to have her there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Follow through on that.
All right, so
Next Thursday, yeah?
record efficiency,
Is it Thursday or Wednesday? Thursday?
Fantastically.
Thursday.
Thursday, the 9th.
Thursday at 6.
Thursday the 9th.